All right, good morning again, and welcome to our webinar about the federal social solar benefits for nonprofits. Looks like most of the people are in who are going to be here, so we're going to go ahead and get started right now. My name is Jim Nail. I'm with Massachusetts Interfaith Power and Light, and I am delighted to be joined by longtime partners and colleagues in the climate work, the Jewish Climate Action Network, and Resonant Energy. And a new friend, Scott Kadish of Greenvest, who's also a member of the JCAN board. Um, and I'm delighted to have such experts here to walk through all the details. And it does get very detailed and nitty gritty when you are applying for these benefits. So we're going to go through a little more detailed introductions here for just a couple minutes. Then we'll set the stage with the purpose of the webinar and this, setting the stage for how this came about through the Inflation Reduction Act. And then just go right into the details of what's called elective pay or direct pay, depending on which document you look at, and all the nitty-gritty stuff about how to apply. And then we'll open it up for questions. But of course, if you have questions at any time, drop them in the chat. I will be monitoring that. And then as we get to the end of the session here, I will be pulling out those questions and directing them toward either Scott or Resonant, depending on who I think is probably best to attack it for. All right, so let's do introductions. As I said, I'm Jim Nail, president of Massachusetts Interfaith Power and Light. We're a 20-year-old nonprofit organization that works with houses of worship of all faith traditions on climate justice, lowering their carbon emissions, and of course, you end up saving money. So what's not to like? But we've had a very active solar for houses of worship program since 2012. Resonant has been a partner for, I think, Madeline, we were saying about 8 years the other day. And they've done a large number of houses of worship. So they're very experienced, and we've had a great experience with them. And our website is massipl.org if you want to learn more about us. So I invite you to take a look there. I think now I pass it over to Scott.
Mute myself. Okay, there we go. Good morning, good morning, all. Again, my name is Scott Kadish. Professionally, I'm a financial advisor specializing in socially responsible investing. I also work for Cheryl O'Grady CPA in Newton, Mass. Amongst other kinds of tax returns, we also prepare nonprofit tax returns, including 990s. I do volunteer. I'm on the board of the Jewish Climate Action Network of Mass, and also serve as the chairperson of a national organization for keepers of the land, or Shomer Haaretz, and I'm happy to be here.
Hey everyone, I'm Colby Lawless. I work at Resonant Energy. I'm an account manager here, so I help with our ITC EJ adders and our direct pay applications. I also help with our consent process on affordable housing. I've been in the industry for 4 years. I studied sustainability and renewable energy in college, and I'm joined here by my colleague, Maddie.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Madeline Barr. I'm one of the co-founders here at Resonant Energy. I've been in the clean energy industry for little over 10 years now here in Boston. And my background is in energy efficiency work, solar, electric vehicles, and community-based programming. And I also joined Scott as a JCAN board member.
Let me get unmuted. There we go. So as you can see, we've got a great group of panelists to talk about this topic today. Probably don't need to say a whole lot about why solar. Obviously, there's a lot of cost savings you can get if you're generating your own electricity instead of buying it from the utilities. And obviously, carbon emissions reductions, clean energy. But I think something that's becoming more and more important is if you pair solar with batteries, you've got greater resilience. in the event of some kind of outage or other problem. And that can be very important as a nonprofit so that you can continue serving your constituents. But I think also for those of us in the nonprofit world, we are all about, to some extent, making the world a better place in whatever little corner of the world we've chosen to work in. And so having solar panels and being able to tell our stakeholders that we are using solar energy, I think is another expression of our commitment, to that mission. Now, solar can be a great benefit, but of course, there are some issues you need to deal with. It can be expensive up front. I know in a lot of the houses of worship that I've worked with, it's often $100,000 or higher initial investment. Before we had the Inflation Reduction Act and direct pay and elective pay, really leases and power purchase agreements, dominated for nonprofits. These were great because you didn't have to find the money up front. A lease is very familiar, just the way you lease a car, you lease your solar panels. Power purchase agreement, similar in most ways. Some slight technical differences in that. But in either of those cases, you get less savings than if you're able to purchase the panels yourselves. And I've seen, certainly in the house of worship sector, a big shift toward direct purchase since the IRA. Often this is done with a loan. You can take a loan, and then when you receive the prepayment, or you can make a prepayment when you receive the funds from the elective pay. So you can really manage that loan very effectively. And in many cases, many faith denominations have building loan programs, or even some have green loan programs that offer very attractive interest rates. And in many cases, the electric bill savings can actually cover the loan payments. So in terms of a budget impact standpoint, it's really kind of a wash. So that's, I think, what has really helped shift the focus toward this direct purchase. But the whole reason for this webinar is it does come with some complications of making sure you do the correct filings in the correct order and get all your ducks in a row so that you can get that elective pay. So looking at who has put their name and their organization in the chat, and if you haven't, go ahead and do that. A lot of you are nonprofit organizations, so welcome. Clearly, you're interested in starting to explore whether solar could work for your organization on your building. Or maybe you've already begun to explore solar, have bumped into these federal incentives, and it can be a little bit of a head scratcher when you first hear about them. Or maybe you're pretty far down the road and are at that stage where you really are trying to line up all those details. And even if you don't know your next step, you're in the right place. We're going to help you out and put you on a path towards solar here. With that, Maddie, let me turn it over to you and tell us all about the great work that Resonant does.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Yeah, so happy to dive in here a little bit. Again, my name is Madeline Barr with Resonant Energy. And just a little bit about who Resonant is. We are a Boston-based solar provider. We specialize in serving nonprofits, working with all types of institutional nonprofits, food pantries, homeless shelters, multifamily affordable housing, houses of worship. And our goal is really to be able to expand access to clean energy. And what's been a big focus of our team's work over the last couple of years is figuring out how do we get this sort of tidal wave of federal incentives into the hands of community serving organizations and into impactful clean energy projects. These are just a few examples of some of our projects around the state, in case these buildings are familiar to any of you here on the call. We have the Vipassana Meditation Center out in Western Mass, a school and parish down in Fall River with the Fall River Catholic Diocese. Right below that is a parking canopy, which is, we'll talk a little bit more, is actually a third-party owned low-income community solar project with Temple and Muna in Lexington, and East Boston Neighborhood Health Center just recently completed a rooftop array across their building out in Revere. So I'll talk a little bit kind of where we are and what is this moment in the clean energy industry and solar in particular. So as I'm sure many of you have felt directly, electricity rates continue to increase pretty rapidly. This data was last updated in early 2023, but you can see there were these huge spikes from across all the utilities, National Grid in particular, but also across the state of Massachusetts, that did then sort of drop again once we got past the winter spike, but generally it's on the up and up trend. And what this means for organizations is that they're spending a ton more and have to allocate more of their budgets to operating costs, electricity bills, instead of the programs that your organizations are designed to serve and are part of your mission. Nationally, schools K through 12 spend $8 billion a year in electricity. And the opportunity here with solar is that you could cover, based on a number of factors, but you could cover really between 40 up to 100% of your building's electricity use and take that 8 billion and invest it in the meaningful work that is part of your charter and your mission. So there's a lot of opportunity here in the form of really real impact. And the Inflation Reduction Act, which we'll be talking a lot about today, was signed into law in August 2022. And it represents the biggest climate bill ever passed by Congress. It's $390 billion in climate investment. And that's across solar and wind and energy efficiency and transportation and all of these really important sectors. And where we are right now is that more information continues to be rolling out. Our team just submitted back in the fall with the first round of environmental justice tax credit adders. We're helping our very first clients now get the direct pay. So it's all very fresh and very new. But it represents a really huge impact for nonprofits and for solar. And there's a couple other state and federal funding sources available too. And just to name them, not to conflate everything, but just to name kind of what is coming down the pike. There's also the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Within that is Solar for All. And for those based in Massachusetts, you may have also heard of the Massachusetts Green Bank, which is a new entity launched by Governor Healy's office to support decarbonization of affordable housing. So it's really, these are all, Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund is the umbrella program that includes Solar for All, but a lot of really big funding opportunities right now. So, that's why we wanted to plan this webinar, get our partners together. We're also working in a number of other coalitions with community groups to really figure out how do we get organizations really at the front of this queue to benefit from these new programs. And here's just a quick timeline of kind of what all has happened, what has happened over the last 2 years from when the bill was launched in August of 2022. Over that next year, essentially, the Department of Energy and the Treasury Department were releasing new guidance on what all of the information would look like, how the programs would work, what different sort of programs the money would be going to. And then in fall of 2023, the first tax credit application period opened for projects that were applying for what are referred to as environmental justice tax credit adders. So these are additional benefits for projects that are either located in or serve environmental justice communities. And so our team and Colby will be speaking next in particular, helped our clients apply for about 100 separate applications across the projects. And then over the first few months of this year, the award letters came out. We saw just how much interest there was across the country for these programs, and many of the buckets were way oversubscribed. And now we are currently in the next tax credit application period that opened at the end of May, and it's a 30-day window open through the end of June. So in a little bit more about the Inflation Reduction Act, what it could mean for your organization. So one of the main things is it's an increase in tax eligible expenses. The solar investment tax credit itself is not a new thing, has been around for a number of years. But not only did it increase from 22% to 30%, but now you can include not just equipment and installation, but also other work that's required to make your building solar ready, with some exceptions. Not everything, you still can't do roof replacements, but utility upgrades, electrical work can now be included in the tax eligible basis. Elective pay, also referred to as direct pay, is the key provision in the IRA that allows nonprofits and other tax exempt organizations to receive the tax credit in the form of a direct cash rebate. So that's a game changer for nonprofits and creates a much stronger cash flow for organizations, as Jim was referencing, that do want to own their solar. And then also there's a number of really strong provisions in the IRA that are aimed to center a lot of this funding around low income and environmental justice communities. So there's additional, what we call adders on top of your 30%, based on how the project is set up, who it's serving, who it's owned by, that can increase your tax credit up to 60% in some cases. So we'll talk more about that. I just went through this, but yeah, again, many new costs are now eligible in the ITC, which reduces, aim to reduce the getting your building solar ready and some of the electrical work as well. So here, just to sort of paint a picture, a little bit of what these look like in a real example. This is a community center in central Massachusetts. They are proceeding with a direct ownership, low income community shared solar project, which means that the nonprofit is going to be the owner of this solar array. It's a really exciting project and an exciting story, and a group of really motivated nonprofit leaders and community leaders. They had extra space on their building beyond what the building actually need. So they opted for this program that will max out their space. Half the power will go to the nonprofit and the other half will be sold at a steep discount to income eligible residents. And kind of what those numbers shake out to be is this is about 163 kilowatts, producing 183,000 kilowatt hours per year. The upfront cost before any incentives will be about $524,000. Because it's a low income community shared solar project, it qualifies for the 50% tax credit. So again, that's the 20% on top of, for the community shared solar, on top of the 30% base. So they'll be getting a credit of about $262,000 within the first 12 to 18 months of the project when it comes online. Their year one electricity savings, about $24K. Year one state incentive, this is Massachusetts specific, about $14,800. And so the project has then, paid for itself by the end of year 8. The organization is seeing about $218,000 in 25-year net savings. So paying off the project, paying off that 524, an additional 218. So there's really robust incentives and programs, and I think momentum right now that we are here to help you with and here to explore with you to do meaningful and high impact projects that also serve your organization's financial needs in the long run. I'll pass to Colby next to talk a little bit more about those details.
And
yeah, thank you, Matt.
While Colby jumps in here, I neglected to mention that this is being recorded, and the recording and slides will be available on the Resonant website, and they will be sending out a notice when those get posted. So know that that resource will be available. Okay, over to you, Colby.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Don't worry, there's no quiz and you don't have to memorize all this. We will send it out. So I'm going to be talking about the environmental justice adders. We call those EJ adders, and direct pay. And direct pay is the same exact thing as elective pay. Those are interchangeable terms. This is very dense. We tried our best to have some pretty graphics in here, but just going to dive into it. So these are the adders. They are in addition to the 30% ITC that you can get back on your solar project. We can start with the low in location. It's a 10% increase from that 30%. This one you have to apply for. It is limited and it's not guaranteed that you're going to get it. And it must be sited in a low income community as defined in the IRC. So there are some maps that you can see. There are some maps that you can look at to see if your project is in that location. And then we have the energy community and the domestic content, those 10%. These ones are actually automatic. They are just granted to you if you qualify. 10% energy community is a census tract located near former coal power plants. So power plants that were closed since the year 2000, they'll give an additional 10% to a project located in that area. And then domestic content is containing parts and components made in the USA. This one can be a little trickier to get. We see it a little bit more with carports and things using a lot of steel because that is often produced in the US. The low income community solar, this one's an additional 20%. And again, you have to apply for this one. It's not guaranteed. 50% of the output must go to low income households defined as income less than 80% of AMI. And then there's affordable multifamily housing. This is a 20%. And the solar array's financial benefits must be must be distributed among occupants. So this one, again, you have to apply for. And the first one here, the low income location, or the last two, these cannot be combined with each other. They just stack on that base 30%. So if we go to the next slide, this is just another visual of the same information. The baseline ITC, that's going to be 30%. And then that additional 10% is for the EJ location or energy burden community, not both, just 10. Or if you're doing affordable housing or a low income solar project, then you could get that additional 20%. And if we go to the next slide, this is the energy community or the domestic content adder, 10%. Technically, those could go together. So these could really be that first 140 could technically go to 50%. This 50% could technically go to 60, and the last one could go to 70%, but that's domestic content on top of the energy community on top of the other ones. So there are a lot of really great opportunities. So at Resonant, in our first application year, we got our clients over $1.5 million on their solar projects just in the adders alone, which was really exciting. As Maddie said, we almost had 100 applications. We didn't have any rejected. Not all of them received it because, as we've mentioned, it's a competitive process. So there's a 30-day window where everyone's applying. And then after that 30-day window, you can still apply, but nothing's guaranteed and some things fill up quicker than others. So we're really grateful to get this. How to know if you're eligible. Again, we're going to be sending these slides, so you will have access to these two links. And we can send them in the chat right now. So we have the energy community map and the low income bonus tax credit map. So you can put in any address throughout the country and it'll tell you everything that it can qualify for. And that's what you'd be putting on your application. So who is eligible for elective pay, also known as direct pay? This would be tax exempt organizations, also municipalities, towns. Indian tribal governments, rural electric cooperatives. So here is a general timeline of elective pay, how it's going to work. So if you applied for PTO, which stands for permission to operate in the year 2023, or if your tax year started in 2023 and ended in 2024 and your project turned on during that time, then this is the tax season that you are going to be re-registering for elective pay. And if you are a nonprofit, so you got an automatic 6-month extension. We know that you don't typically file for taxes, so there are a lot of questions, I'm sure, but essentially you can either go by a fiscal year or just the standard, and that tax season you got an automatic 6-month extension to apply for elective pay, and then the rebate period goes through to 2025. And again, that's still for projects that could have been turned on in 2023. And if you go to the next slide, this is the same exact thing, but for 2024. And this is actually not available yet. So if you had a project that you just turned on in 2024, the tax period started in 2024, you're not just yet going to worry about it. But here it is, just for your reference when it comes out. And now I want to hand it over to Scott, who's going to talk about the process of application.
Thank
And
you.
I will, and Scott, I'll just invite people to start submitting questions into the chat, because we'll get to Q&A in just a few minutes.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the process of the pre-filing registration as well as filing taxes. So solar projects that are eligible for the tax credit must have been placed in service before your nonprofit can register for the elective payment. The IRS recommends submitting your pre-filing registration at least 120 days prior to filing your tax return. Once you're successful with the pre-filing registration, you get a registration number, which is valid for the taxable year for which it is obtained, but it's not, if for some reason you don't end up filing during the year, you get the registration number, you can still renew it, the registration number each year. Now, specifically for houses of worship, who are going to do solar projects, you'll do the pre-registration process, get the registration number. What's new is that to get the elective pay, houses of worship now have to file a 990 tax return, and for many of them, they're exempt from having to file. So, but that is how houses of worship will get the elective payment. Good news is the IRS is flexible so that you can choose either a calendar or fiscal year filing plus your extensions, as long as you provide documentation if need be. There's one other form besides the 990 called a general business credit, or Form 3800, and that just kind of has more detail about the actual solar energy project. And there's also a very specific place on the tax return, the Form 990, where you'd acknowledge that you are seeking the elective pay credit. Next. So the pre-filing registration application is quite lengthy, or it's not that lengthy. What's lengthy is the instruction manual. I've attached a link to it, but some of the pieces of information that you'll have to bring together, some you'll have for your nonprofit, others you would have to go online, and you need to get the latitude and longitude of your location, census tract. Just be clear that there are 2 different sections that both make nonprofits eligible for elective pay. You can only choose one. You can't use both. And if for some reason, after submitting the pre-filing registration process, your application isn't approved, the IRS comes back and wants additional information, as long as you provide it within 35 days, you can keep the process going. These are, again, some resources for the pre-filing registration application, a guide to pre-register, to pre-file, a helpful direct pay checklist I found by this Clean Energy group. It helps you track your process. The Department of Treasury, basically, I know I saw a little earlier that I think in reality, probably the time to get your refund or elective pay back is probably a little longer than 45 days from when you file your tax return. But that is what the IRS is targeting. So that's pretty good news that they're going to have the staff and people in place to make that happen. And finally, I'll just plug, I work for Sarah O'Grady CPA. We're a small women-owned business. We have more than 30 years experience filing income taxes, and we do work with nonprofits and houses of worship. And our goal is to help them navigate the pre-filing registration and Form 90 income tax filing process so that they can receive the elective payment from their solar panel installation. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Scott. That it looks very intimidating, but I think the steps you gave us makes it seem a lot more doable. So yeah, so we are at questions. So feel free to drop questions in the chat. I am not seeing any yet. I actually have a question. So while we're waiting for others to put questions in, this is regards to the low income adder, because I'm working with some houses of worship up in Lawrence right now, and I don't think we're going to be in a position to get into this, current window for the low income adder. So should we wait to the next window, or can we go ahead with the project, get the project up and running, and then file whenever the next window opens up?
Yeah, great question. It depends how far along the project currently is. To apply for the environmental justice tax credit adder, depending on whether the solar array is connected directly behind the building's meter or on its own meter, what we refer to as a standalone or front of the meter system, you need different documentation to apply for the EJ adders. So if the client does already have a signed contract or a utility interconnection approval, they could apply now. If they don't, they can definitely wait till the next round, but they would just want to make sure that they do not apply or energize the system before applying for the EJ adder. So projects have to wait until they have the adder in hand or don't get in, which is tough, to then apply to the utility for permission to operate, which is the authorization to energize your solar array.
Okay, we do have some questions starting to come in here. One question. So the nonprofit registers after the project is installed. That's correct, I believe. Is there a chance the credit will not come through?
So like Maddie said, we're talking about credits, so I want to make sure I'm getting the right thing. Again, the EJ adders you apply before the system is turned on, but direct pay, it's going to be after you get PTO, permission to operate. So direct pay, if you are eligible, you are going to receive it. That's not competitive at all, but the adders are competitive. So hopefully that answers the question.
Do you know what sort of criteria are they using to make those competitive decisions? Is there any sense of that?
Great question. There is something called additional selection criteria. So if you are a nonprofit, that automatically gives you kind of a better chance of getting that adder. As well as another community. There's another guideline that I should see. It's
consistent poverty.
Consistent poverty, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, census tracts that are designated as consistent poverty census tracts. Projects located in those areas also qualify for this additional selection criteria, so that some of the total available space in the adder is carved out for projects that have additional selection criteria qualifications.
Another question about whether the presentation will be available afterwards. Yes, it is. And again, Resonant will send out a link once they have a chance to post all this on their site. Another clarification question. When Colby referred to the 30-day window to apply, and these are competitive, is that just the adders or also elective pay? I think we just answered that. So again, elective pay, not competitive, no 30-day window. The adders is where the low income adder is the 30-day window. But adders like the energy community and domestic content, those are not competitive, correct?
Yep, you automatically will receive those if you qualify, and you do just have to file, you have to pre-register for elective pay 120 days before your 990 would be due.
Yeah. Got it. So does direct pay require filing Form 990 and others?
Yes, just direct pay equals elective pay. And yes, you do need to, for that specific payment, you are required to file Form 990.
I know this comes up a lot with, my sector, the House of Worship sector, because many faith-based organizations don't have to file any forms. And so now, like, for the first time, they're like, what? We have to file a 990? Do we really have to do that? And the answer there, is yes. And we were having this discussion the other day in our prep. But it is a one-time filing, just the year you are applying for the elective pay. Once you're through that, you don't have to keep filing 990s, correct?
That is my understanding, yes. Because a lot of this is so new in terms of direct language that that addresses that, Jim. It hasn't. That would be my assumption, but it hasn't been really specifically codified in the in the IRS text. So but that seems to be common sense that it would be a one-time thing.
Here's a really good question about the idiosyncrasies of timing on these things. So a nonprofit with a fiscal year end of June 30th, 23 completed a solar project on several group residential homes in their fiscal 23. Is it too late to apply for the credit?
If they've already been turned on, then yes, I would say it's too late for those. I think that's also before the ITC was announced, like the adders. So I believe that it is too late for those, but again, you're not the IRS. We are reporting on our experience with this. So if you want to confirm that, there's contact information you can reach out to. But if this hasn't been turned on, you cannot apply for these matters.
How about the base ITC?
Every solar project will receive that 30% ITC.
Right. But they may have filed their 990 for their fiscal year already.
That's interesting. Right. So the question then is, if they've already filed their 990, can there be a gap in the tax year for them to then file again, or for the next filing to include the solar direct pay? I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like it's like a good question on a test if you're taking a financial accounting
Yeah.
class.
Right.
Kind of a
Right.
tongue twister. Just in dealing with the IRS, you know, my belief is that they are flexible, and if you have, if as long as you're within the window, like with the IRA, and if they were offering the the basic investment tax credit in 23, and you installed it and turned it on in 23, my experience has been that they are flexible. I mean, and it should also be in the language at this point. So I don't of the Inflation Reduction Act. So, but to be honest, yeah, I would have to. Katie, I'm happy to, if you want to send me your email, I can get back to you on that. Okay.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Next question about bridge loans, and nonprofits needing to finance uh, to bridge that 12 to 18 months you talked about between paying for the project and receiving the IRA funds. Is that something you're seeing commonly?
Yeah, that's a great question, and a great, I think, insight into what sort of resources would really, would really help close some of these gaps, because a nonprofit still does have to come up with all of the capital for the project. They still have to come up with the $500,000, um, even if they're getting 50% back, but they're not getting that 50% back until maybe 18 to 24 months after the fact. So we are seeing a need for some more kind of custom financial products, such as bridge loans. Some lenders who are already familiar with solar, some banks who have done work with solar, I think are dipping their toes in. But there's definitely, I would say, a need for that sort of custom product.
Another clarification question, the difference between elective pay and direct pay, if any.
No difference.
Yeah, just different terminology that the law uses direct pay, but the IRS, as I understand, has a direct pay program. You can, pay your taxes direct. So then they use the term elective pay in all of their paperwork, but it is referring to the same thing. So Scott, on the pre-registration, my profit is looking to register for type 48E clean electricity investment tax credit projects. But in the credit selection, 48E is not specifically is not shown as an option. Any recommendation?
You're muted, Scott. You're talking.
Hi. Yeah, I was just saying that I'd have to look at the part of the application, and I know there are different numbers that represent different types of projects that all should fall with under, the to get the elective pay. But I don't know. I don't have any recommendations about that. But yeah, I mean, you have to, do the best you can to submit the application, and then the IRS would let you know if you haven't completed it or any additional information about it.
Will this all still be in place for projects that don't happen until next year?
Yes. Yeah, this should be happening for 10 years. Those are just the timelines that we've provided so far.
Probably underlying that question is how dependent is this on the outcome of the election this year?
That's a great question. And of course, we can only speculate. I think the good news is that the solar investment tax credit as a program is not new. It's been around for a long time. It has survived the past few administrations. So we're not worried about it getting rolled back entirely. I think it's possible that some parts of the IRA could get rolled back. And if I were to guess, it would be potentially some of the more environmental justice focused pieces, or some of the electric vehicle focused pieces, but that's totally speculation. But I can say with I would say some confidence that we're not expecting a change in administration to totally cancel this program. It's fairly well established, and there's a strong precedent for it.
Okay. So are the projects we're talking about generating electricity just for the applicants' buildings, or are there community solar attributes of these projects? And I think, Madeline, you mentioned that with the case study you showed us.
Yeah, this is a great question. We're referring to both. Some of the solar projects can still qualify for some of these adders if they serve only the building that they're located on. And some of them can be community solar projects. And yeah, Jim, to your point, the case study I shared, the power from that project, only half goes to the nonprofit host, and the other half is a community solar project going to income eligible residents. And in fact, some of the adders, specifically the category 4 low income community solar, is specifically designed to support community solar projects.
Got it. Question about the size of systems for clients who have received awards. Have the installations been mostly under 1 megawatt?
They have all been under 1 megawatt. There is different guidance for projects over 1 megawatt.
Okay. Interesting question. Shouldn't sale/leaseback be more attractive now post IRA?
That's a great question. In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. I think what we're seeing right now that's still challenging for some of the third-party financed arrangements is that there's still like pretty high interest rates and cost of debt. So that even with the additional incentives that are available for financing firms and overall, increased opportunity, we are still seeing some barriers for, just due to the high cost of interest. We're keeping an eye on how that's going to change with some of these other funding sources I mentioned coming through over the next few months, such as the GGRF funding and the Solar for All. So we're expecting that to provide some more options, but and pretty imminently as well. But yeah, to answer that question directly, there are still some barriers with cost of debt.
Got it. Couple more questions. Someone's head is spinning with all the deadlines. So is there some kind of checklist that can help clarify what needs to be done when and in what order? And I think a couple of slides kind of showed a little bit, but
I don't know if it's exactly what you're looking for, but I did that clean energy website that's there's a link to it, has a fairly, it may not be everything, but it has a pretty good checklist in terms of, what you need to do, and you put your date in. And I thought it was definitely a decent guide for that kind of thing. But yeah, there's a lot of steps, and it is a bit complicated. But yeah, if you check that out, that link, I thought that it does help you keep track of where you're at.
great.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think, the purpose of this webinar isn't it's meant to provide resources to people. Part of the process that we assist all of our clients with is tracking all of those timelines and deadlines for you. So I'll leave our contact information in the chat for everybody, but would be happy to follow up and assist, with a specific project. But yeah, we're, the current period is open now, and there are a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different tax credits that could apply for. So yeah, we're, working with our partners are here to assist with making that streamlined and easy for you.
Great, great. Another question, are there other opportunities or avenues to monetize the credits other than the direct pay option?
Yes, there is transferability, and I sent something in the chat. I sent a link on it because that's going to be pretty dense and specific to your case. So please take a look at that in your free time if that applies to any of your projects, but you can transfer some or all of the credits to someone else to purchase.
I think probably, again, I'm reading between the lines or guessing that the question is, do we get our money faster if we transfer the credits than if we did the direct pay option?
Technically, you would have a contract with who you are transferring those credits to. So that is a possibility. That definitely is an option if it's in the contract that you guys decide.
Okay. Okay. And here's an interesting question, a little on the side of the topic, but one of our attendees would like to hear about Resonant's workforce development and comments that this seems like a good tool when speaking to municipal leaders to help build support and buy-in for projects.
Yeah, that's a great question. We are part of a few workforce development programs actively. One program in particular with some Boston and DC based partners called Shine is working to connect folks to a workforce development program where they can get really targeted training to work on solar projects at different stages of that project's development. And so with this program, I would say a number of our low-income community solar projects that we are currently working on are going to serve as learning and training projects for graduates of that program. So we're really excited about it. It's a recent program that has some DOE funding, working with ABCD and RARE as our two nonprofit partners. And trying to, I think, with all this new momentum for solar, be able to expand the benefits of solar beyond just savings and location, but also to solar careers and solar jobs. So I'd be happy to speak more with anyone offline about that.
Yeah, and then we have someone sort of asking again about the availability of these next year and beyond. And sort of the short answer is, barring any major attack on it after the election, the IRA law as written goes till 2035. And so these, again, barring some major change, these things will be available, certainly be available in 2025. And again, the solar tax credits have a long history of support over many different administrations. So there will be something for sure. With that, I think we have gotten all of the questions in. You will see if you go into the chat, there are links or there are email addresses for Madeline Colby, info@Resonant Energy for general sort of questions, as well as Scott at CherylO'GradyCPA.com if you want to get in touch with them with follow-up questions or projects that you have going. That will be great. And as you can see, tremendous amount of expertise here on this webinar and that can support you as you move forward in that project. So any last words from Resonant and Scott, and then we'll sign off and let people get on with their days.
I think nothing else from our side. Thanks to everyone for your time. Great chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank
All
you
right,
very
have a
much.
good day.